Morning, everybody. Hope you're all well. Thanks for joining today's webinar session. I'll just wait a few moments just in case we've got a few last minute joiners. I've popped a link in the chat box as well, which is the handout accompanying today's session, if you'd like to download that while we're waiting. Right, okay, and also the session will be recorded as well, so it will be emailed out to you following the session as well. Okay, so it's lovely to see so many familiar names popping up. That's great. Nice to see you all again. Perfect. Okay, I'll just send it one more time, and then Sabina will take over sending that for me. Thanks, Sabina. Bless you. Great. Okay then. So thanks for joining us today. Morning. Another Thursday. Where do they go? They fly by, don't they? So welcome to 9 Dots Development. It's lovely to see and hopefully hear you all today. You do come on mute, so if you'd like to say something, please take yourself off mute. And also you've got your chat box as well on the system, so you can, if you look at the little speech bubble and you open that up, you can click on the link there and you can write in there, so I can read those if you have any answers or any questions as well to ask me. Okay, so my name's Kerry Clarkson. I'm one of the trainers here at 9 Dots, and it's a real pleasure to host today's session with you. What we do at 9 Dots, we offer an extensive range of training programs and professional apprenticeships, and we also have this free content series as well, this Developing Yourself and Others. And we do this every 2 weeks, and it explores a real life situation or problem that people might be going through, experiencing with their teams and organisations. And what we do, we look at the behind, what's causing that, and we have a discussion. We offer some tips and advice through free articles, podcasts, videos, like the one and webinars like you're on today, and also on the handout that I've sent you there that you can download. There's lots of further information and recommended reading that will also help you on effectively managing poor performance as well. Okay, so as I said, today's session then is on effectively managing poor performance. So what we're looking at today is people rarely come into work to do a bad job. Everyone wants to do the best that they can and reach their potential, and sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes people might behave in a way that's contrary to the organisation's policies or behaviours or standards. Maybe they're not reaching their competencies, their knowledge and skills and behaviours required for that role. And if we leave that, it could cause potential problems for the future. So it's really important to know how to deal with managing poor performance, and that we actually deal with it and not let it go underground, really. And we have to tackle those underlying difficulties, even though it might not be pleasant, but it's really important that we do that for the person that is struggling with poor performance, for us as managers, and for also the organisation as well. Okay, so let's start with the objectives then for today. Let me just cover off WebEx in case this is your first time on WebEx today. How we run these webinars, it's an interactive session, so as I said, you do come through on mute, so if you want to take yourself off mute so you can talk to each other and talk to me if I ask you any questions, or if you've got any questions you'd like to ask me. And as I said, you've got the chat button as well there. You've got the handout that you can make your own notes on, or you can listen today and then you can listen to the recording after and then make notes. And as I said, you'll get really useful information in that handout as well. Okay. So the handout link I've sent in the chat box. I'll just send it once more in case we've got any late joiners. So the objectives then, we're going to be looking at identifying and understanding the reasons for underperformance, how to better manage our underperformers and really be able to successfully manage their performance and on an ongoing basis. Okay. So when I ask you what is managing performance, what springs to mind for you? What does that mean when you hear the words managing performance? If you want to take yourself off mute or in the chat box, however you prefer.
I see that as growth and development.
Fantastic. That's lovely. That's good. That's a positive. Fantastic. Who was that? Sorry.
Amita.
Amita. Thanks, Amita. Great. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's sometimes people see managing performance as a negative. So you're spot on. It's about how can we help and support our people be the best that they can be? How can we help people reach and even smash their potential? So perfect. Yeah. And it's unfortunately some people and that may be the way that they've experienced things, see managing performance as an objective setting exercise at the start of the year or an end of year review, and being told, right, this is what you need to do, these are your objectives, and I'm going to be sitting on your shoulders telling you what you should be doing. And it's not about that, is it? So in the chat box, yeah, Paula, reviews and supervision. Natalie, setting targets, assessing strengths and weaknesses and coaching, and Manpreet, managing overconfidence. That's an interesting one, yeah. So some people might not want to admit, really, especially if we do gap analysis, that they might not know something as well as they show. So yeah, really interesting. Kirsty, supporting people to do the best work they can do. Absolutely. And we've got a responsibility as managers, leaders, supervisors, working in HR as well, to support people to do that. They're in a role, and these roles change, don't they? We all have a job description, but I think the day-to-day tasks and activities kind of rarely, after a few years, fit that job that we applied for. There might be a few other things that we do. So it's making sure that people have the ability, have the confidence, they've got the knowledge, skills, and they're doing it in the right way. So they've got the right behaviour. So this managing performance that we're talking about, it's this ongoing conversation. We're looking at, yes, we're setting objectives, but it's that monitoring, it's the support, the feedback, regular one-to-ones as well. And there's lots of different activities to support people's performance, making sure that we don't leave it till 12 months down the line when we do their appraisal and say, well, you've got a underperforming rating. It's our responsibility to identify that and actually support them to reach their potential, both, as I said, for themselves, for us as managers, but also for the organisation as well. So I mentioned a few there in regards to the activities that we should be doing to make sure that people do perform. But it doesn't always happen. And there's some valid reasons why performance isn't managed as well as it could be. We have to be really careful. The impact of not having these activities, of not having focused conversations, in the short term might mean we have a bit more time because we're not doing what we need to do to support our team. But in the long run, it will actually cost ourselves in time and the organisation in time and money in recruitment, because people may not be reaching their full potential, and therefore our team doesn't, therefore our organisation doesn't. So, and that's what I'm key is really understanding, looking at the what's in it, the with him, what's in it for me as a manager, and also your team member, as to why managing performance is so important, and putting time aside for it, because it's not a box ticking exercise. There's a reason behind it. Okay. There's lots of benefits and advantages to managing performance, and there's some obstacles and barriers in the way that kind of gets in the way of us doing that. So tell me some of your experiences of what are the benefits? Why do we spend time on performance management? Why is it important? Why should it be a year-round thing as opposed to somebody's not doing something very well, therefore you jump on them?
It's Amita again. I think
Yeah,
sometimes
Meta.
it can actually, hi, sometimes it can actually reflect on yourself if they're not performing.
Mm,
I think it's our responsibility as their line managers to make sure that they are on target, they are developing, they have that self-worth, because that, and you can see the progression.
absolutely.
Um, through training and talking it through, and you also have different characters, some quiet, some very chatty, and you want to make sure that they all work together as a team.
Absolutely. Perfect. Yes, well done. Yeah, it's really important to that self-worth. You know, as I said, no one wants to be an underperformer. People don't come into work to do a bad job. So it's actually right, how can I support you? And we'll look at it at the moment as to what are the reasons why people don't perform. So spot on, thank you. And some good comments in the chat box as well. Thank you. Helps to reflect on and reward progress, Manpreet. Yeah, to focus on a specific area of the role that needs attention. Agree how this is going to happen. Fab. Year round to ensure comparison. Is this usual for them? Could someone else be going on? Is it? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is it a personal issue? Is something happening behind the scenes? Absolutely. Shows them you're going to give them support throughout the year. Absolutely. Yeah. Issues and achievements are recognised. Yeah. In the moment as well, isn't it then? And it's dealt with. Boost morale. Yeah, absolutely. That confidence. Identifying issues of any changes. Yeah. And it does takes pressure off the team. Yeah, absolutely. Because how would they be feeling if it's like they're carrying somebody? So yeah, really good answers, guys. Well done. So yeah, there's a lot of advantages for the person. They're being motivated, they're being developed. That self-worth, that job satisfaction as well. And as managers, supporting, we have that job satisfaction of seeing this person develop and grow, and we have a strong team. It frees your time up to concentrate on development as opposed to the underdevelopment. Um, and a true manager and leader gets recognised through their team. It's not about look how good I am as a manager. It's look at my team. I'm the foundation. I make my team look good. And you're as a manager and leader in the background saying, this is my team. This is what we've done together. Fantastic. And the organisation benefits as well. So there is definitely benefits and advantages of investing your time. Unfortunately, things get in the way. So we have to be really careful about, and I think time is probably one of the ones that is at the top. There's always something else that we're kind of firefighting of. Things get in the way of that one-to-one, that observation. We'll do that next week. You've got to think about the effect that has on the person of being devalued and like, oh right, okay, so that's more important than my one-to-one or my development discussion. So yeah, we've got to be really careful that we follow through, we book things in, and we ensure that nothing takes us away from that, because the barriers are there, and we might be thinking actually it's easier just to kind of let it go, especially if we're that employee might feel a bit victimized, misunderstood, feels picked on because they're not performing. You might be spending more time with them. So it's again, we don't want it to be unusual, because if you spend time with your team developing and having one-to-ones, it won't look unusual that you're spending time with them. And plus, we don't want the rest of the team to be demotivated and demoralised. The fact that you're spending all the time with your underperformer. We need to be fair and actually develop our top performers too. Okay. And of course, then for the organisation, by us spending time developing and ensuring our team are performing, it's saving the cost of recruitment, the cost of turnover, and more productivity as well. Fabulous. Okay, so let me just check the chat. Yeah, absolutely. It's accountability measure. Absolutely. Otherwise, how do we know how we're performing? We need to have targets to see and monitor to see how we're performing. Absolutely. Yes, Jacinta, the feedback is huge, isn't it? Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. So 9 months ago, you did this. It's like, well, a lot of things have happened since that. It is. That's why it's that continuous feedback. And there's different types. There's that in the moment feedback. It's that monthly one-to-one feedback. And it's whatever that the need is. And again, don't forget, feedback can be like managing performance. It's that well done, that thank you can be just in the moment as well. Okay, so these managing performance activities, this objective setting is really important to know what we are targeting them on. Okay, but also it's a two-way. What do you want to what do you want to achieve? How can I support you with that? The one-to-ones are there to make sure we're on track and actually help bring us back on track if we're steering off course. And we're monitoring that progress. That's what we're measuring against. We're saying, right, how's things going? What do you need? What support? And that goes hand in hand with that feedback and development discussions. So it's that it could almost be a cycle, but there's no kind of start or end to it. It's literally all of them all of the time. Okay. Jacinta, yeah, especially if performance leads to exit, it shouldn't be a surprise and supports disciplinary procedures. Absolutely, we don't. One-to-ones are there for our team to support us, but also to support them, but also as a evidence trail that we've done everything we can possibly can. We have given opportunities for our team to improve. This is how I've supported. This is the progress. This is what happened. Same with one-to-one ratings. We don't want it to happen at the end of the year and then say you need to, it's like an improvement rating. And it's, well, if you'd have told me 6 months ago, I would have had an opportunity to put it right. If people don't know, they don't know they're doing wrong. They don't know they could do even better. Sometimes it might be an ability issue. It might be that person is in the wrong role, and that's no one's fault. And we can actually support them to get to a role that makes them happy, that makes them satisfied. Okay. So talking about all those activities I mentioned there, what about your organisations? How do you manage performance and monitor at the moment? Some organisations will have a structure, some organisations will have a check-in and a chat and not be so formal. And I was just interested to see what works for you, what ideas and good practices can you share with each other? What works for you?
Our company is a mix of monthly one-to-ones and very much ad hoc on the job coaching and commentary. We're a pretty positive management team, and one thing we do quite well is that we're not necessarily one team manager. All managers keep an eye on other teams, so
that's good.
We spot things and might highlight it to the team leader, or may even interject with someone if we saw something that was not living up to our expectations. So we do that quite well. But having been a manager in the past of big teams, I think we do sometimes risk putting almost too many performance indicators out there, and that is, yeah, that's open for discussion whether we do or we don't. But I think you can overcomplicate it. So you know, your team member doesn't know whether they're coming or going because there's too many things to manage performance with.
Too many spinning plates in regards to objectives, but then how do you measure it as well, and who's measuring it? So it's what do I need to do and how do I need to do it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that idea, Mark, of that it's not you and your team, it's a supportive network, so everyone is looking out for everyone. So if your team members kind of put on a show for you, maybe other people will actually pick up on that if they're, you know, so that's really good.
Yeah,
I like
and actually, as the manager, it doesn't necessarily mean you always get the best out of your people based on personality type. So it's sometimes good to have a different type of personality looking in on your staff.
I like that.
believe anyway.
Yeah, that's really good. It sounds a very supportive organisation as well, that it's an ongoing as
Yeah.
opposed to 6 months and 12 months. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Really good. Thanks for sharing, Mark. That's
Okay.
great. And there's lots of ideas as well on the chat box, so keep an eye on that as well, guys. So I won't read them all out because although I'd love to, but I'm sure you can read them as well as we're going. So yeah, it's about those check-ins, isn't it? It's about the one-to-one supervisions, the team meetings. I like that. PDRs. And you're right, it's not about just about performance, is it? It's about well-being. You're right, Paula. Yeah, it's how are you? What's going on in your world? It's not about right, sit down and right, how you performing black and white against these objectives, which is important. And yes, we do that. These the KPIs and your what do we expect from you? But again, it's really important to check, are they motivated? Are they engaged? Are they happy? And that is, again, it's a part of our management role and HR role to keep an eye on our people. There might be, and that goes even if somebody's performing, it's still really important. But it's always looking behind the scenes, what is affecting performance. If somebody was previously high performer and now they're struggling, what has changed? Has a process changed? Has something happened? As you said before, it could be personal things, but it's not about saying, right, you haven't achieved your target, therefore you've got this rating. It's understanding, it's that conversation, that communication, and being approachable enough to say, what's going on? Is everything all right? And your team not feeling judged, that they feel comfortable to say, I don't really get this. Can I have some more training on it? Or can you show me another way of doing it? Or how should I do it? So it's coming back. When we looked at the personal development plan on another webinar, it's looking again at the knowledge, the skills and the behaviour to be able to do the role successfully, but also that well-being side as well. Because somebody could be doing all those, but underneath, it could be a show, couldn't it? It could be something else is driving. Are they engaged and happy and motivated? Because if they're not, it would be a short-term measure. Okay, so some fantastic ideas there in the chat box. Well done, really good. And it doesn't have to be a structure all the time. It can be just that check-in. Should we grab a cup of coffee? Let's go and have a chat. Tell me what's going on in your world. And sometimes that breaks down the barriers. It's showing you as a person, not a manager. It's building that trust. I don't know if you've read Lencioni's book on the dysfunctions of a team. It's building that trust, but showing vulnerability as well, that you are a human. You know, you do understand things, you do understand life. Yes, we've got a business to run, but how can we do that together? How can I support you? Do we need to make any adjustments? Okay. So some really interesting ideas there, guys. Thanks for sharing with each other. And that's what's really good about these webinars, is we all come from different organisations, but managing performance is still the same. It's how we can support our team, but we can all do it in different ways. So yeah, really, really good ideas. And picking up on that point you said before about the Jacinta said about the exit interviews. Although I mentioned these chats and the check-ins, you at least should have one, probably a month, formal that's documented. So if it does unfortunately get to a situation where HR is involved, you can evidence that you have done everything. You have had development discussions, you have had a personal development plan, and you've done everything you can before it got to that formal stage. Okay. Fab. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for sharing that. That's great. So so we know about managing performance, but it's really important to actually, how do we identify that there is an underperformance? What are the signs? Okay, so we can see that it can happen for different reasons. We've talked about that, and lots of other things can affect someone's performance on a day-to-day basis. But usually there's something underlying, and it usually comes to these four kind of areas. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing, so they might not have had they haven't been told, they haven't had direction potentially about it. They can't do what they're supposed to do. So is it like an ability? They don't wish to do what they're supposed to, so that's more of like a choice. Maybe there's been a change, or there might be some kind of underlying medical condition or some kind of personal issue. So it might be that there's been a drop off in performance because something's happened, or it might be that somebody's in a new job and one of these things are happening. So it might be somebody who's just never been told. So with the what, for example, maybe they've never been told that that's what you're supposed to be doing in this job. Maybe they've not had training on it. Maybe it's been assumed that they have the knowledge to be able to do it. And then as it snowballs, they don't feel comfortable to say, actually, I don't know how to do that. Can I have some training on it? Because they might feel a bit judged. Training needs analysis are really good, but sometimes people might put, oh, I'm 5 out of 5 and everything, because they don't want to look like they can't do their job. So it's about creating this approachability that they can say, look, I'm not quite getting this. Can you, I need some either training, or can you tell me what I need to do? And this is why the objectives are so important. So when things change, we need to make sure people have this direction. Sometimes, unfortunately, people might be in a role that may have changed, some new, some might be some additions to it. The way the world is changing might have changed their role as well. And it might be they just simply can't grasp it. So we've ticked off box number 1 because we've done the training. They know what they need to do. Okay, but for some reason they just can't do it. So we have to look at that and think, right, okay, let's see where the gaps are. What can I do to support this person? How can I do a development plan? What are the areas that this person needs more focus on? That might fix it. Or it might be, no matter what you do, unfortunately, this person doesn't have that ability. They've got hundreds of other skills and abilities, but this isn't one of them. So we're looking at what we can do. Can we realign the role? Can they pick up other tasks? Or is it a responsibility as a manager and leader to have that conversation and say, right, okay, this role has slightly changed now. What do you want to do? What's the best course of action? We've tried the training, we've done the development, and it might be that they come to you with that as well. Okay. The third one then is this choice. They don't wish to do it. And this is where the difference here is they've done it already. They've done it once. So you know that they can do it. They're able to do it and they know what they should be doing, but they're choosing not to. So this is where it slightly changes because it's more of a conduct issue. There might have been a change and they prefer the way they did it before. and this is their kind of silent protest. Right, I'm not doing it that way. It was better before. Or they're just trying to be, maybe they're attention seeking, maybe they've forgotten, maybe they're being awkward. There's lots of reasons it could be, but they're choosing not to. So again, it's looking at checking in, looking at what is the underlying reason, and having that constructive conversation, giving them feedback. Do they know the impact that they're having by not doing it? Do they know the reason as to why you're asking them to do this task? Maybe it's a misunderstanding, it could be. But again, it's conversation. And lastly, there might be some kind of personal issue or medical condition. So again, responsibility here is the flexibility, the adaptability. What adjustments can we make? Okay. Especially if it's a short-term thing, it could be that they might need some time off. But imagine how engaged and thankful this person will be that you go to them and say, what can I do to support you? How can I help you? Okay. What adjustments can I make? It's so important that we're proactive in that as well, that we look out for these signs. And why it's so important to understand what is the underlying reason, because if I started training somebody when they're choosing not to do something, they're going to think, actually, you know what, I'm just going to let her keep going. She could just train me as much as she likes, but I'm still not going to do it. Or it could be that I might come across as patronizing, or it shows that I don't actually really know my team. Same here, if I just keep on training this person, it's not going to get any better. If I put this person on a conduct disciplinary because they're not doing what I asked them to do, how demotivating would that be when they don't actually know? I haven't given them the opportunity. And same here, if I say to somebody, right, you're on a warning because you've turned up late, how do I know what's going on in their life? They might not have slept because they've got a newborn baby. What can I do to support that? Would you like to change your hours if that's possible, to come in a bit later? So there's lots of things we can do to see what that underlying reason for that underperformance is. Okay. So some things come on chat here. So John, yeah, never assume that your team are all at the capability level. They'll not tell you. Focus on their strengths. Really good. Absolutely. It could also be complacency, boredom, lack of interest, not being challenged in their work. Absolutely, Amita. Yeah, it might be this underperformance is because they don't really want to be there. They might have kind of ended up in this job, and actually it's not really what they want to do. And again, our responsibility to have that conversation and say, well, what is it you want to do? How can I support you with that? Okay. Fab. Okay, so
Can I just ask a question there?
Of course.
For everyone really, but is there a sort of a typical time cycle on identifying someone can't do it or won't do it, and them exiting the business? Because can we draw this out too long? Can we pander too much, dare I say it, and then as a manager spend a lot of time and resource on something that actually we should be nipping in the bud? What are the thoughts on that in terms of times? Is it 3 months, weeks, a year?
In my experience, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it depends on the organisation. In my experience, Mark, I think people have like policies and procedures, and because of probationary periods and warnings, but there are time limits on those warnings. Would anybody else like to share on what you do in your organisation to give an insight into that for Mark, please?
I think we've got all those policies and procedures, but I think for me the problem is, like, I'm too soft.
Oh, Leslie, bless you.
Oh, there you go. At least someone's
You know
got
what I mean? I know I've got all these policies and procedures and I could do it, but what I need is the kind of I don't know, just to work out how to be able to be a bit more kind of assertive with using them, rather than just, you know, and it is lots, you know, I think through COVID it's been really hard, hasn't it? You know, people have had lots and lots of personal issues. They've had kids off school and at home. Well, how do you manage to when you've got your kids at home? That kind of stuff. And then the kind of, you know, emotional and mental health impact. So yeah, there's just something about, I don't know what that noise is. There's just something about having the confidence, I guess, and to be able to put them into practice.
I agree with Leslie as well. I find that we can come across a bit inconsistent as well. So we might have a rough couple of months and then we see some good performance and we'll praise that, you know, you want to concentrate on the strengths, and then they might slope off a little bit more or feel a bit disengaged, and then you bring it up again, but you kind of you're not very direct about it because you're like, well, you were doing well, and you're trying to cheer them on, and actually it then affects how you're managing them, and they like backfire that as saying that you're inconsistent, and that's what I kind of struggle with the most, especially when you like the individual, because like 9 out of 10 times you think, oh, they're lovely and they fit in well with the culture of the business, but there's something that doesn't they're not consistent, so they reflect their inconsistency back onto you, and that's where it's kind of hard to manage those chats and those conversations, I find.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think that is hard because we're here because we've been or are managers, and we, you know, like to help people. It's in our natures, people, and so I think you could become emotional, and that makes it hard. I think what we're looking at today on the slides, as you read it, you go, well, that absolutely makes sense, but actually putting it into practice is the skill, I think, as managers. Is the one to develop.
I was talking with this, actually. I work with a business coach as well, and I was talking with her about this a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, because you know, I'm here because we are having some issues with a member of the team at the moment, and she said to me, do you want to help this person? And I think that that's a really kind of key question, actually, because sometimes, and Kimberly, what you said there as well really rang true for me, because sometimes you do really like that person, you know, sometimes you really, you know, people can be really good colleagues, but then be underperforming in their role. And I think that trying to kind of balance those two things and bear it in mind that, yes, this person has no kind of ill will towards the business and no ill will towards their colleagues. And I think that can make you kind of put your rational brain aside. And I think that it is quite hard to bring your rational brain back into the center, really, because like you said, we are people, aren't we? And we want people to do well. And I think it's really important to recognize the point where actually you need to switch from kind of your emotional self to your rational self and think, right, no, this has become a problem for other people. So that's how I try to measure it, is this impacting on the wider team? Is this impacting on other people? Is it making other people unhappy? And at that point, then I think that's when you kind of have to think, right, I have to put my personal feelings aside. But it's difficult.
Really good.
Absolutely.
That's really good, Kirsty. Thank you.
With what Mark was saying, it's the time drain, isn't it? It's such we put so much investment into doing the right thing by the people who report into us, but it takes such a massive amount of time. It puts an awful lot of pressure, because we can spend hours and hours doing this, especially when there is an issue, because the same reason I'm here is that there's been an issue. But we've still got our jobs to do around it, which can add to the frustration, I find. It can add to the frustration of actually having to deal with it, something that you'd really rather not deal with, but you know you've got to. But in addition to that, you're having to put in late nights to get your job done around it. It's not just doing something, is it? It's not like you can say, right, I've got to do that, and you just do it. There's an awful lot of thought and time that goes into the process to make sure that you're confident you are doing the right thing by the business, and the fair thing to the member of staff is a real balance, isn't there?
Absolutely. And it's making sure the decision isn't already made, that you're going in with that mindset that you do want to support and improve performance. You haven't made that decision to manage them out, you know, that term. It's going in with that positive mindset, saying, right, and I like what you said, Kirsty, about the impact on others, and you could actually use that in your feedback, because I'm sure that person wouldn't want that either. and say, oh, I didn't realise that. So yeah, that might motivate them to want to do something different and try a different, and show that you're not having a go at them. You're saying, right, how can we do this together? What can I do? Who else can help you? Who else has that strength that they can actually buddy up with, shadow? And that's the important. We'll look at a personal improvement plan in a moment, but it's very much like the personal development plan in the fact that looking at the gap and who has that strength, what activities can close that gap, who can support with that. It's not just on your shoulders off. So we've identified this is what needs improvement, off you go, I'll see you in 3 months. It's actually what activities can close that, and we give this person, and not hang that over their head saying and it looks like 3 months is the common denominator in the chat there. We're not saying, right, in 3 months time it better be this or else. It's say, right, okay, let's look at the tools, the activities, the support that you need, and check in. You know, it's not about micromanaging. Just say, right, hey, how's things going this week, and look for that change, that turning of the corner. But time is a thing, and that will be in the policies and procedures, that this is a time, especially performance improvement plans, there'll be a date on it. But I also think everyone has to be treated as an individual. There might be individual circumstances, but it's still got to be fair to everyone. So I don't think it's a hard and fast, black and white answer. I think it depends on the organisation, depends on the situation. But the biggest thing I can say is that it's that mindset of, right, going in with this positive, right, we can turn this round.
Yeah, and Kim's a colleague of mine. She's made another good point, is that you find yourselves as a manager going, right, I'll set you some objectives because that candidate isn't perhaps coming up with anything. So you sell the objectives, they're not bought into them. You go back in a month's time, they've not done a thing. So you kind of need them to come up with their own ideas on how they can develop themselves, and then guide them and support them in that. So that's a really important point.
Really good. Nice one. Thanks, Kim. Yeah, it's that ownership. Otherwise, it could come back down to point one on here, that direction and what. It's like, well, I'll say yes because you want me to say yes, but I still don't know what you're talking about. It's that ownership. What do you think? What can we do? And it's that over to them. Very much like your one-to-ones and your personal development plans. It's their document. You're there to have that conversation with them. Very much kind of like going down the coaching route of pulling it out of them, because then they own it, and they can't then turn around either and say, well, you told me to do that. And it's like, well, no, it's yours. It's who do you think you can work with to improve? Fab. Okay, so again, just some examples for you. The first one here, then, somebody's been fixing computers for many years, so they know what they're doing in regards to that. But recently a customer survey has been introduced on fixed rates, and sorry, it's always been on fixed rates, but now it's on customer service. So this is a really good example of somebody just not knowing. It's not been communicated. So a decision has been made somewhere that we're going to start measuring our engineers on our customer service, but no one told James. We'd hope he'd be giving a good customer service anyway, not just because he's being measured, but easily fixed. It might be a training issue, but the main thing is he needs to know. Otherwise, how does he know he's going to be measured on it? The second one here is the ability example. So there's a process change. Tony's keep making errors even though she's had retraining. Okay. So a good example here might be doing a gap analysis, and then potentially a performance improvement plan. But it's under can we close that gap? If it's an ability, it might be that Tony is unable to do this. There's certain things that we can all do that no matter how much training we would get, we can't do it. And that's no reflection. It doesn't make us a bad person. It's just that we're not suited to that, and that's not a bad thing. So again, it's a responsibility for us to actually help this person. We don't want this person going home at night feeling a failure, feeling, oh, I can't do it. It's really frustrating. We need to kind of step up and say, right, okay, what are we going to do? What should we do? How can we make this better? The third one then. So Simon,
Can I just
yeah.
ask, what can we do if they can't make it, if they can't do it? If they actually can't do it and are never going to be able to do it because they just don't have the ability to learn to do that thing,
Yeah.
and it's a requirement of them in the job. It wasn't a requirement when they applied for it. It's now a requirement. It's a new requirement. What do we do?
Well, Leslie, it's a difficult one. You might have to see if you can make adjustments. Maybe they can take on a different task as opposed to that one. But then you have the difficulty then of other people in that role might be saying, well, I don't want to do it either. They might have the ability, but they don't want to do it. So it's a very challenging one, because you might have to have that challenging conversation and say this role is no longer suitable. But then it becomes a legal aspect, and you'd have to get HR involved.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because if it's not what they were employed to do in the first place, and you've changed their role and not made sure that their new role is something they can actually do, then that's not their fault in a way. That's not the job they applied for, is it?
No.
Legally you could be looking at constructive dismissal.
Potentially, but it does happen, Leslie.
I know.
With organisations now, they used to have as an example, 5,000 employees. Now have 3,000, because people are doing 2 or 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, that's the way of the world, isn't it? But I'm no expert in that, Leslie. So it would be a legal issue going down the HR route, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'd talk to the person about how they're feeling, because their engagement and motivation must be very low if they're constantly making errors as well. But yeah, I'd go down the HR route with that, I think, Leslie.
Because it's not necessarily underperformance, that is it? They may have performed in their job that you actually recruited them to really, really well. You've just changed their job. And if you haven't made sure that they know how to do it before you do that, then in some ways that's your responsibility for doing that, isn't it?
Yeah, and sometimes these changes are put on us as managers and leaders to say, right, this is what your team now does. When I used to work in banking years ago, banking in the old world, we'd have cashiers who would literally take the money, put it in the drawer, and stamp the checks and stuff like that. I haven't been into a bank for years, so I don't know what they do now. But over time, I was managing people on the counter that then they were targeted to get so many insurance quotes, so they became salespeople.
Yeah.
And after some people in the role of the bank, they'd been there 25 years doing the cashier role. They weren't salespeople, and they didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So again, but that's the role now. And sometimes in the contract, they have clauses where it's a flexible contract, and your role can be amended. Or so I think legally there are loopholes, but I'd say that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. My mother was a bank manager, and they started asking her to sell stuff. She left.
Yeah, and I
Didn't
think
like
a lot
it.
of
Didn't
people
like the
did
pressure.
that. Yeah, because it was targets, and it's like, well, that's not why I joined the bank 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But how the banks have changed, if you look now, there's hardly any cashiers because it's all automated. But that's the business world, isn't it? We change to survive. But yeah,
Exactly. And I was just going to say that businesses do evolve, and sometimes we never knew we were going to have this pandemic, so we've had to adapt to that. So things happen, and I think that staff have to realize that, and it is in their contract to say, things may change, and as long as you can document that you've given them the training and you've given them the time and support, I think even if you're going to go down the legal route, as long as it's documented, I think you've got a very good case.
Because if we all stood still, we wouldn't be anywhere, would we? You're right, we wouldn't be in business.
Yeah.
Especially if we didn't adapt and do things online in these last few years.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing, guys. That's really, really good. And some fabulous points on the chat box as well. That's brilliant. Fabulous. Thank you. That's great. Lovely. So yeah, keep an eye on there, because I can't. We would be here till about 1 o'clock this afternoon if I was looking at every point. So please, you keep an eye on the chat box as well for some good ideas. Okay. So where we're Simon then is the top performer, but he's choosing not to now. Then he's choosing not to send these figures in, and he can do it because he's done it once before. So here then there's a choice. He doesn't like the change. So it's looking at the conduct behind here. So we'll be giving Simon feedback, trying to understand why he's doing that. Does he understand the impact? Does he understand why we need the figures? So it may well come down to disciplinary action after all of that has been documented. Okay. And then the last point there, again, supporting with temporary adjustments, flexible working policies. How can HR help you? How, if we've got a support network, can we do a referral? So again, it's not all on your shoulders as a manager and leader. We have got support out there as well. Okay. Fab. Okay, I'm just going to move on, guys. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time as well. So when we think about managing underperformance, then, as I said before, no one, I'd hope, comes into work to do a bad job, but it's making sure that we're demonstrating that we're there to support them. We're identifying how we can help them. So looking at those gaps, like we talked about before, the knowledge, skills and behaviours, creating a personal development plan with them, using those SMART objectives, thinking about their learning styles. So how do they take this information on board? Are they a visual learner, auditory learner? Do they like to read? Do they like to do stuff and learn that way? Are they an activist? Do they want to get up and do stuff? Do they want to observe someone, reflect? Do they want to read about the theory behind it? Or do they want to look at the real world? Why does this work in the real world? So there's lots of things. It's not just about giving them the objective and saying, off you go. Okay. So we talked about this before on previous webinars, and comparing it to that driving analogy then. So the knowledge side is the theory. So do they know what they should be doing? So is the gap on the what? Is the gap on the theory side of it, the facts, the information, the understanding of it? So this would be comparing it to the theory book in driving. You could pass that, the theory, right? I know that when I get into a car, I turn the ignition key. I know that I need to look at the mirror. So I know what I should be doing, is the knowledge. The skill is actually taking that knowledge and putting it into practice. So some people will be really good at knowing what to do. When they come to do it, suddenly find it's actually quite difficult. So I know I need to put the key in, but I stall it. Oh, it's because I forgot to put my clutch down. Right, so I do know it, but I forgot to do it. And then I find it really difficult to get the biting point. Absolutely, Natalie, like losing weight, yes. I know I should be doing. I know I shouldn't be eating that chocolate. So you put it into first gear, and then I stall. Oh, it's practice, practice. So have we got the ability? So some people will take 20, 30 times to pass their test. Some people may never pass their test. Some people do it on their first go. Again, like a role, it doesn't make them a bad person. It just means there's better things suited to them. So can they do it? Have they got the ability to apply that theory of mirror signal to maneuver to actually doing it? And then how are they doing it? So I know what to do. I know how to do it. I'm doing it. But the way I'm driving I've got no consideration for other drivers. I pull out on them. I don't indicate. I'm eating an apple and putting my lipstick on while I'm driving. I've got my music really loud. I ignore the traffic lights. I just drive as I like. That's the conduct. I know what I'm doing. I can do it, but I'm doing it really bad. I've got a right attitude. Or I might not be motivated. So I don't want to go out. Actually, I know I can do it, but I really don't want to do it. I don't like driving. I don't like all the people. I don't like going on the motorway. So it's finding out what is that gap. Why isn't that person performing? And we can do this in lots of different ways. You've got the SWOT analysis by looking at people's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. You've got the 360 report where you can ask people for their feedback so we can see what areas. And there's lots of other things that people can look to kind of open that Johari window of that blind spot, okay, to be able to develop more. Okay, so it's finding out what that gap is really important, because again, as I said, if you start teaching somebody how to drive by applying the knowledge when they're actually, it's a behavior issue, that's not going to improve anything. So it's knowing what to focus on. And what we've talked about before is sometimes they still might not improve, even though we've done all we can in regards to the knowledge, the skills and the behaviours. And this is where, unfortunately, it might go down the performance improvement plan, and it might go to the disciplinary, the formal management process, performance management process. So the performance improvement plan then, it's a really good tool, but it's how it's kind of presented as well and communicated to the person. It's not a weapon. It's do this or else. It's a right, okay, let's sit down and think about how we can close this gap for you, like the development plan, but this is in regards to a specific performance. So it's usually an area where it might be recurring performance issues or recurring behaviour issues. So you wouldn't do this straight away necessarily, and this is why that recording of the information is really important leading up to this, because you don't want this to be the first thing that you do. They might be already having one-to-ones already about it. So it's a formal document, and on here you're going to have the performance issues, that clear list of goals, the timeline, what activities can we do, because it's really important that we give them an opportunity to improve before a performance improvement plan, but also before it goes down disciplinary. Okay, so what do we need to do to close that gap? What activities? Who's going to support you? What are you going to do? And then the review date. And that review date is really important, because we don't want it to kind of let go, just kind of like no one ever follows it up. I've done a PIP, that's it, that's all I need to do. It's not about that. It's a tool to help someone improve. So it's giving them that opportunity. So we do need to be really clear with them as well. And remember, with these kind of performance warnings, they're only live for so long as well, again depending on your policies and procedures. Okay. If that performance improvement plan doesn't work for any particular reason, again, depending on your policies and procedures, you might be doing another one. Maybe we didn't go into enough detail about the activities. Maybe we're going to go for another 3 months. Or maybe this person hasn't tried or demonstrated any desire. So we want to make sure then that we're doing everything we can before we get to this stage. And here we would include HR for support and guidance. And again, it's much more structured and formal, with potential for warnings, rights of appeal, accompanied meetings. So all those kind of things that we need to take into account, and we need to know all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. Okay, and HR will support with that as well. Okay, both for your own protection and the organisations, but also that the person has every opportunity. Okay? But I'd hope before you got to this stage that if it's a motivation issue, that well-being issue, that we don't get to this point. We're understanding what's that driver. Okay. Has anybody had experience of the performance improvement plans and disciplinary process after everything you've done to get to that stage? Yeah, it's not a nice place to be, is it, Natalie? It's a tough one, but as managers and leaders, it's one of our responsibilities. So we need to be able to do it. But I'd always say there's so much to do beforehand. Okay, and that's giving them the opportunity to improve. We know we've done everything we can, and we've empowered them to do everything they can. But unfortunately, these situations, as you've said on the chat there, thank you, they do happen. So we need to be able to do that, and also look to ourselves. If we got the knowledge, the ability, the behaviour to do it, do we need development on these areas as well? Who can we observe do that? Who can we train off as well? Emma, yeah, very time consuming. They didn't seem want to. Yeah, and it might get to that stage that we might get to this stage and they choose to leave. It's not a nice situation to do, but we need to make sure that we have the knowledge, the skills, the tools and the behaviours to be able to deal with it. But you know, you've done everything you possibly can. Okay. So thank you so much for today. It's absolutely, Paula, yeah, absolutely. And work with HR from the start, definitely. Some fantastic chat, guys, today. Thank you so much. What are you going to do now? Is it what's it giving you food for thought today? Been quite a juicy one. We've gone up to 11:30, haven't we?
Sack some people.
No.
Joke.
I think it's an affirmation, you know, gives you the confidence that maybe what you're doing is right, you know, because sometimes the feedback can be quite challenging and you can get emotional, you know, when somebody maybe reflects back onto you, or when somebody's upset about, you know, you think it's obvious, don't you? And most of the team think it's obvious, but it's really hard when the individual's not aware, and those initial conversations are quite challenging. But at least, even though it's a bit rough, it will become smooth and it is the right thing to do. And it's just having that affirmation that you need to just continue to do this journey, and it's the right thing for everybody and all parties involved.
It is painful, having done it many times, and it's the stuff that you take home at night. And I think it's the hardest part of management. I think working with the people, driving teams, motivation, doing all the good stuff, love it. I think this is the hardest part.
Yeah, most natural leaders and managers are the most caring people in the world. So you find that part does definitely pull with your emotions and your heartstrings, really.
Yeah,
I think that. Sorry.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say about the understanding the gaps. It's not kind of. I think that because the way that we approach it, it's very obvious, I think, to us as managers that someone's underperforming. But I actually, it sounds so simple, but I genuinely haven't thought, like, have we actually checked whether these individuals, whether they understand what their role is? Do they actually understand what is being asked of them? And even down to the basis of, like, do they understand when a task is considered complete? And I think that's something that's maybe been missing from our discussions, is like, what is your perception of when a task is finished and you can walk away from it? And I think that that's going to be something that's really useful for us, actually, is just having that really, really fundamental and basic conversation of, do you understand what's expected of you?
Yeah, sounds simple, doesn't it? But I bet we miss it. I bet we miss it all the time.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be sat here if I'd cracked that one.
Right, there we go.
You take it for granted what you know as well, don't you?
Yeah.
So you think something's very simple, and then actually you're quite shocked sometimes when somebody doesn't know a key functionality or doesn't understand what their preference is, what their job is, or what we expect of them. And sometimes it's quite an easy. I've had it lots of times where somebody's not known how to do something, and then you've just told them, and then actually it's not a bother anymore, and people
Yeah.
move on, and you feel quite content. But it could be something so small that's impacting quite a lot, and absolutely that gap is yeah, brilliant.
And create an environment where people can ask, because
Yeah.
we did a session recently and no one had asked, and yet they were saying they didn't know how to do things. Did you ask? No, I just sort of fuddled through and then gave up. Why
Yeah,
didn't you ask? We keep telling you, ask. So have to create an environment where they feel safe to do that, don't you?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's harder when you're working kind of hybrid or remotely as well, because I think that I think that people maybe, especially people who are newer into businesses, they can make assumptions that people are working in a different way. And they maybe don't see the kind of, there's a lot of unseen conversations versus what there used to be maybe when we're all sat in an office together.
Yeah. You can hide a lot, can't you, when you're remote work? You don't see the behind the scenes, you only see the finished product.
Yeah. That's another topic, isn't it? Altogether.
Yes.
Managing remotely.
But it is, I mean, it's Project Aristotle was really interesting, where it was one of those is creating this safe environment, that it's okay to share, it's okay to ask. It's really important that they feel safe and they're not going to be judged. Really important. Fantastic, thank you so much. That's really good. I'm just going to ask you a quick favour before you go. If you could just quickly do the poll for me. It's just a few questions to answer for me, just so again we can tailor future webinars to you. And I'll also put in the chat box the links to our the future free content as well, and 95% funded training and private training that we offer as well. Some links in there. But yeah, don't forget to look in your handout that we sent. There's loads of information in there, blog articles, training programs, link to books, free consultation, and a recording of this will be sent out to you as well. Okay, so you'll have a feedback after the session, as well as the this poll that you're doing as well. And also, just to let you know, if you go on the website now, I know we always show what the next two are coming up, which is the time management and the buying for training. If you go on our website now, we've also got 12 new webinars just been released on there as well that you can sign up for. So have a look at those topics on there, see if anything tickles your fancy on there. Lots of different topics that you might find interesting. But yeah, if you know, if you've got any recommendations for things that you'd like us to cover, again, just let us know. It's really interesting to spend time with you and grab all your ideas, and I really appreciate you. You're happy that I don't read out all the stuff in chat. It doesn't mean that it's not value, because it's really good for you to share with each other as well. Okay, but I'm just conscious of time, and I don't want to run out, because we would be here forever, which I'd be quite happy with, because I can talk forever. But have you got any other questions or any comments before we go? Thank you for your comments in your chat box. Thank you. Anything else we can help you with or point you in the direction of?
No, that's good for me. Thanks very much.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Lovely. Thanks ever so much for your time, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, hopefully.
Thank you.
Nice one.
Thank you
Have a
very
lovely
much.
day.
Thank you very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Take care all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. The poll's still open, guys. If you're staying on, you can still you've got a couple of minutes left on the poll.
I'm just staying on just to read some of the chat.